prisons are where we detain the world's worst criminals. While some of these inmates are in for pretty much minor crimes, heck, some of them are even falsely accused, others are truly monsters in human form. And those are the people we're going to be talking about today. From an unlikely killer to someone who's probably the sickest individual to have ever walked the earth, here are the most dangerous prison inmates in the... Okay, I can't keep that voice up. Here are the most dangerous prison inmates in the world. Our first entry goes to Mary Mallon. Now, it's not really known if Mary Mallon knowingly went on her killing spree. Nevertheless, she left at least 50 dead bodies in her wake before she was captured and imprisoned. She's first on today's video because she is not your typical murderer. In fact, one could argue whether the term murderer could actually apply to her. In any case, though, here's the story of Mary Mallon, infamously known as Typhoid Mary, and you decide if she was indeed a cold-blooded killer. Mary Mallon is very unique in this list because she killed using a deadly disease called typhoid fever, which is caused by the highly contagious Salmonella typhi bacteria. It is then spread through contaminated food and water. This is very significant due to the fact that Mary worked as a cook in various upscale homes in New York in the 1900s. From 1900 to 1907, she worked as a cook for 7 different families, and during her time with them, people in the household died from typhoid fever. The reason is simple. Mary was a carrier of the bacteria, but she never showed any symptoms of being sick. This uncanny immunity to the deadly disease has led people to believe that she did not know she was a carrier, and in turn isn't to be held liable in the many deaths she was linked to, but more on that later. The trail of dead bodies wouldn't have ended if it weren't for the tenacity of George Soper, an investigator hired by the family of one of the victims to look into the strange deaths. It was actually Soper who managed to link all the deaths to Mary, and was also responsible for her to be confined to North Brothers Island, which was then used as a quarantine facility for victims of smallpox. Here she lived in isolation for quite a while, and from here she lobbied her release, arguing that keeping her confined is going against her basic rights. She was released in 1910 with the condition that she never work at a kitchen ever again, a promise that she would quickly break. Under the name of Mary Brown, she worked as a cook in the Sloan Maternity Hospital in Manhattan. Predictably, an outbreak of typhoid happened in the hospital, with 25 workers contracting the disease, 2 of which died. She was apprehended for the second and last time, and spent the rest of her life in complete isolation. Now, here's the controversial part about this story. Many have since claimed that Mary knew that she was a typhoid carrier, even before her first capture, but still worked in kitchens fully knowing that she could give others the disease. Whether this qualifies her as a murderer, I'm gonna let you all decide. In any case, though, let's end her story with a fun fact. Mary Mallon wouldn't have turned into the infamous Typhoid Mary if it weren't for ice cream. Yes, peach ice cream was her specialty. And of course, since the bacteria can live in cold food but is easily destroyed by cooking, she probably wouldn't have killed a ton of people if she opted to serve apple pie for dessert instead. Our next entry is Dennis Rader. Dennis Lynn Rader, born in 1945, would in later years build a notorious reputation as a serial killer. He has 10 murders under his belt that authorities know of and has since been dubbed the BTK Killer, also sometimes the BTK Strangler. What does BTK stand for? Well, it's actually part of his MO, which we'll get more into a bit later. For now, though, let's see how his killing spree began. In Rader's case, he started really young. According to Rader himself, he started at an early age by torturing animals. It was also during this time that he would develop a fetish for women's underwear. A fetish that would later be part of his signature. He considered his victims as his projects, which just shows us how much of a psychopath the guy really is. Funny enough, though, he actually wasn't insane, as his forays are extremely well planned. He would always stalk his chosen victims until he's extremely familiar with their movement patterns, and often he would stalk multiple possible victims at a time, just in case one doesn't work out. Once he has the pattern all figured out, he would break into the victim's house while she was away and wait until she returns. This is the part where he begins doing his horrific acts. I'm obviously not going to get into the details of what he exactly did, as they're too graphic to describe and we're a family channel. But it would always involve rape, binding, torture, and of course, finally murder. His moniker of the BTK Killer was actually made by Rader himself, and the letters stand for Bind, Torture, Kill. He also taunted the police officers who were investigating his killings. Much like the Zodiac Killer, he did this by sending them letters containing details of the crime that only the killer would know. Some of these letters even contained poems. The letters are a chilling read and are available online in case you're interested to find out how the mind of a killer works. He was active from 1974 to 1991 and had 10 confirmed victims. He was finally arrested in 2005 and formally charged with the killings. Now it's time for today's best pick. Today's pick is a monster of a man, and that's just judging by his looks alone. In all honesty, he's got the look of a supervillain in a movie or probably a TV show, and that's exactly who he is. This imposing figure is a character from the Netflix movie and Stephen King novel Gerald's Game. This is the Moonlight Man, who was a cannibalistic serial killer and betrayed by the actor Carol Strucken. This is the real-life cannibalistic serial killer that was put behind bars, and you'll get to know about him next with Jeffrey Dahmer. Born on May 21, 1960, Jeffrey Dahmer was an American serial killer and sex offender whose long list of heinous crimes include rape, dismemberment, necrophilia, and most horribly, cannibalism. From the years 1978 and 1991, he claimed a total of 17 victims, all of them male. Unlike other serial killers who had very traumatic childhoods, Dahmer had pretty much a normal upbringing, although he did become more withdrawn and uncommunicative as he got older. During this time, he showed no interest in the normal hobbies that people his age like to engage in. He also avoided social interaction, and instead he turned his focus on more macabre endeavors. He started to drink heavily and developed an unhealthy liking for examining animal carcasses. Despite the heavy drinking and the morbid hobby, he still did manage to graduate from high school in 1978. But just a few weeks later, he would begin the life that made him one of the most infamous serial killers in the world. He was only 18 years old when he committed his first murder, and his first victim was a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks, which he picked up and offered to take to his dad's house to drink beer. Everything went well for a time. That was until Hicks decided to leave, at which point Dahmer hit him with a dumbbell on the back of his head. He then proceeded to dismember, dissolve, pulverize, and scatter the now pieces of Hicks' body throughout his backyard. His motive? Well, he just wanted Hicks to stay a bit longer. He wouldn't kill again for another 9 years. He tried to attend a college, but dropped out due to alcoholism. He then enlisted in the army as a combat medic and served in Germany from 1971 to 1981. But again, heavy drinking led to his discharge, after which he moved back home to Ohio. He was then sent by his father to Wisconsin in an effort to stop his drinking, but that never worked as well. He started frequenting gay bars and by 1985 had developed a habit of drugging various men before raping them as they lay unconscious. Although arrested, he was never charged of rape and was let go on probation. In 1987, he murdered for a second time. This time his victim was Steve Tuomi, and it was followed by 2 murders in 1988 and 1 in 1989, and then 4 in 1990. His MO was similar in all cases. He would lure unsuspecting men to his house, drug, rape, and strangle them to death. He even started dismembering corpses, committed necrophilia, and even preserved certain body parts of the victims, some of which he put on display and, well, some he ate. Dahmer was indicted on 15 murder charges and his trial began on January 30th, 1992. And although he pled insanity, he was still found guilty on all 15 counts. He was sentenced to 15 life terms for a total of 957 years in prison. He barely even lasted 2. Thank you, Christopher Scarver. Before we move on, do me a favor. My analytics show that only about 15% of you watching are actually subscribed. Come on guys, what's up with that? Can you guys please hit the subscribe button? You guys watch my videos every day anyway, so you might as well subscribe and keep up to date with every video we put out. Our last entry is John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy was an American serial killer and rapist who took the lives of at least 33 young males that police know of in Cook County, Illinois. He buried most of the bodies under his own house, while some he simply dumped in the Des Plaines River. He's probably the sickest individual in today's video, mainly because he targeted children, all the while wearing the guise of someone who loves children, even volunteering his services as a clown in children's parties and fundraisers. This earned him the nickname of the Killer Clown. By all accounts, Gacy looked to be an outstanding citizen. He worked as a fast food chain manager during the 1960s and became a self-made building contractor and Democratic precinct captain in the Chicago suburbs in the 1970s. He was also well-liked by the community. Gacy organized cultural gatherings and was active in political organizations and the JC Civics Group. But behind that facade was a truly sick individual. He was first convicted of sexually assaulting 2 teen boys in 1968 and given a 10-year prison sentence. He was released on parole 2 years later, but was arrested again the following year after another teen, shockingly, accused him of again sexual assault. When the boy didn't appear on the trial, the charges were then dropped. In the mid-70s, 2 more boys accused him of rape. This was also the time when police started to suspect him of being behind the disappearances of other boys in the area. Then in 1978, 15-year-old Robert P.S. went missing. It was reported to police that the boy was last seen by his mother at a drugstore where he worked before he headed out to meet GACY to discuss a potential construction job. The police searched GACY's house 10 days later, and it was when the true horrific nature of GACY was discovered. GACY had confessed to committing 30 murders, and his trial began in 1980 with him pleading guilty, but his defense team argued that he was insane and should be committed to a mental facility instead of prison. He was found guilty of 33 murders and sentenced to serve 12 death sentences and 21 life sentences, eventually dying in 1994 via lethal injection. These are some of the evilest people to have ever walked the earth, and I hope we don't see any more of their kind in the future. Did we leave any noteworthy psychos out? Let us know down below in the comments. Also make sure to check out the channel's other amazing content. As always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Later, everybody.